Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of React Roundup. I am your host today, Paige Niedringhouse, and we have a special panelist episode for you. So I'm joined by Jack Harrington.
Hi.
And TJ Van Tol.
Hey, everybody.
And today we are going to be breaking down for you some of the big changes that have been happening recently in the React ecosystem. So this includes React 18, the new and improved version of React, Next 13, which coincides very nicely with React 18. And
yes.
And basically all that has to offer. So we've got new hooks, we have release notes, we have big announcements and flashy conferences that have just happened. So we're just kind of try and dissect all of that a little bit to help you better understand what changes have taken place, what these mean for you going forward as a developer, and basically how to try and take advantage of them as everybody tries to wrap their hands around the new and improved React.
Hey folks, this is Charles Maxwood. I've been talking to a whole bunch of people that want to update their resume and find a better job. And I figure, well, why not just share my resume? So if you go to topenddevs.com/resume, enter your name and email address, then you'll get a copy of the resume that I use, that I've used through freelancing, through most of my career, as I've kind of refined it and tweaked it to get me the jobs that I want. Like I said, topenddevs.com/resume will get you that. And you can just kind of use the formatting. It comes in Word and Pages formats, and you can just fill it in from there.
So I will let Jack kick us off because he really has been the one of all of our panelists who's been the most up to date with this stuff. So let's let him kind of lead us into it.
Sure. So this all kind of started with an RFC that came out, I guess, a month and a half ago, where something along that line. It was this kind of innocuously titled like first class support for async in React. And I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. And again, I got a lot of buzz. So I'm like, oh, that's clearly interesting. And I took a look at it, and it's cool. So basically the idea is that they want to support, obviously, promises as first class citizens. And it gets interesting because you kind of do it differently on the client than you do on the server, right? So on the client, it's gotta be a hook, basically. And so they created a new hook, which is kind of generically called use, like no use something, just use.
Yeah.
And the idea is that you give it a promise you've generated somewhere. And then when that promise, then that use hook then attaches that promise, waits for the results, and then gives you back the data coming out of that promise. And one interesting twist on it is it's the first hook that you can use conditionally. So all the other hooks, right? So all the other hooks you could do, you had to have like all your hooks, regardless. There are 9 hooks in my component. Got to be 9 hooks every freaking time. You can't like return or short circuit. That's going to freak out, which makes sense, right? The way that they manage hooks by index, basically. So that's why that is. But this is cool. Actually, you can basically say, okay, I have a hook that's going to go get my response from my server, and then maybe conditionally, if that one resolves, then have another use that would then give you the JSON from that, if that's the way you want to play it. And this, you could kind of bundle that all in one. In fact, the nice thing about this one is, it's just generically any promise. It doesn't have to be a fetch from a server. It could be promise around a set interval, around a set timeout, or whatever promise you want, kind of thing. When it triggers, you go. And then, let's cover the whole RFC, and then we'll kind of dig into the specifics. And then the server side of the house is entirely different. Entirely different. And it was around React server components, basically. And the idea is now you can actually define your component function as an async function. This is kind of cool. And in that async function, you can use a wait, and you can do something like a fetch, right there. And it'll just block that component until that promise resolves. And then you'll return, you return your data or whatever, your JSX. And through the magic that is React, I guess you're going to have multiple of these running potentially multiple running simultaneously if you have multiple things on a page that are going to need data and do fetching. So it's conceptually, if you're thinking about it from a next perspective, it would be a replacement for get server-side props and also get static props, in the sense that you doing that if you're doing that. And so the RFC came out, and then I think NextConf was like 2 weeks later.
Yeah,
You
it was
know?
pretty quick.
Yeah, it was really quick. And I remember like, so yeah, oh, well, okay, backing up. So this RFC came out, and then you could get yourself onto the experimental branch of React, and then you could import use as an experimental hook. You couldn't really do anything with the async stuff because there was no servers implementing that at the time. At that time, which of course, like 2 weeks later, the ground shifted. NextConf came out, and they're like, "Hey, we have full support for all this. Right? It's just happy happenstance. Wow, And I've heard anecdotally there was a Next.js guy, Versal developer or whatever, who was literally like pushing React branches at NextConf, and it's like, so the two are sort of like becoming very, very interconnected. Yeah.
Well, actually, because I want to step back for a second, and
Yeah,
so
sure.
you said this
Please.
is an RFC, so that basically just a doc. How much of this is real? Because you said that Next announced support for some of this, but is that just in Next? Is like the use hook available in the latest version of React? Can I just use it, or how much of this is actually live stuff?
Should I update right now to the latest?
Yeah. Am I behind, Jack?
I think support for use is now officially out in 18.2.
Okay.
That's not going to help you with the RFC, the React server component thing, though. I mean, that's its own sort of, I guess support for it is in the frame, is in React, but it's also in the framework in Next, because there's kind of but if you just want to use on the client, just pull 18.2 today, and I think you can just literally just import use. And there's definitely you want there's a huge foot gun with use, by the way. Of course. It's like the new use effect, naturally, right? So everybody's just going to want to go and say, cool, use, and then parentheses fetch, and then parentheses blah.
I already had the file open. I was already typing that. So
here's the scary part. That will work. You will see results on the screen. Mm-hmm. You will also be in a glorious infinite request loop.
Oh, again?
Again.
Infinite loops again?
How is it that every time there's a foot gun in React, the result is an infinite loop? Exactly. So that's
Oh no!
And the reason is simple. It's a reference problem. Basically, the fetch resolves. It gets the data from the fetch. That means that you re-render because there's some state that being set. So you re-render, which in turn fetches again. And that's a new promise. So use is like, oh, it's not the same as the old promise.
Yep.
Even though it's exactly the same thing. But references, like React doesn't care about the contents of things. It cares about the reference. Mm-hmm. And so in this case, the reference is new, therefore infinite loop. And even if it wasn't an infinite loop, you'd at least get two fetches, because like the next time you went through, you just fetch again, and every time you'd re-render the component, you just fetch. Mm-hmm. So you have to create some sort of way to cache that promise. Mm-hmm. And you could move it out of the component itself. That's one way to do it. Mm-hmm. Or you could use something like some sort of function that would just say, hey, given this name of this and this fetch function, go and make a map where it's like this value is this promise, and so it returns the same promise over and over and over again. That's the way to kind of defeat it. Now there is, I think, another RFC coming for a new function called cache, which I think is going to do that for you as part of the framework itself.
So why would I use the new use function instead of either making a custom hook that does this fetching for me, which is a very valid option with the way that React currently is, or using React Query and just not having to worry about any of that because it takes care of basically all of it?
Good question. You a Pep Benatar fan?
Sure.
Remember that song? It's a little too little. It's a little too late. I get the feeling that this use function is literally that. Like there are such good alternatives like React Query and SWR. Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody was using, well, not nobody, but like the kind of way that we would teach folks, hey, use effect and use state to go make a fetch. Come on, nobody does that in production, right? Everybody uses React Query or a really well done custom hook. But I mean, in the case of like React 18, we had the double use effect, and people were like, "What do I do?" Like use your React query. It's a great library.
Yeah,
Just
great
use
library. Battle tested, well written.
So yeah. So for me, yeah, use is like, oh, it's cool, but like maybe the situation would be different if it had been with us since when hooks came out,
right?
Like the initial hook, because it always seemed like the one that was missing. Like we had all these promises. Like, why don't we have support for that? But here we are.
I mean, I could see it if maybe this next step can remove some of that additional complexity, because there is something that's really appealing about. There are some apps where all I need to do is just fetch from some endpoint, right? Like, and I just and just having a simple way of doing that without a library, I think there's a lot of appeal there. But it sounds like, at least at the moment, you have to add enough additional logic that it's really not much of a benefit beyond just like you're almost like re-implementing like use effect and then storing in state. Even that basic option is almost a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me a really good question. I didn't have an answer. I should, so I need to go research this. Which is, what happens when the promise catches? And I was like, I don't know. And my hunch is that it probably blows up, and you probably want to wrap it in a suspense or an error boundary. But either way, that ain't what you want to do in production, right? That's ridiculous. What you want to do is like have, something in the in the return that says, "Hey, this was an error," and then you can put up a pretty error message and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Of course, React Query has all of that for you,
right?
With the status. But in the case of just a simple fetch, if you want a more than just a happy path demo application, right? What you probably need to do is wrap fetch in a function where that function then like does both then and catch, and in the term, and when it catch, it would resolve, but it would resolve with like error true, error string, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And when it so
but it needs to
that's just a lot of work, man.
Yeah, and at that point you're basically creating a custom hook, right? Because that's like custom hooks 101, right? You do your fetch, you to return your data or your air condition.
Yeah, and then it's done.
Yeah. So, I think right. 4K for SWR, and you get all that kind of battle tested for free. Yeah. 12K.
So basically, the RFC for use didn't set the React world on fire in the way that they were hoping that it would. Everybody was like, why would we use this, myself included, when we have better options that have been around for longer, that have handled more scenarios, or we can basically create more custom hooks with this.
Yeah, they certainly didn't do the killer app. Like there's no like, oh, look at this demo that's so way superior to everything that we've been doing in the past that it's undeniably cool. Better. Like we didn't get that. We just got like, here's a tool. Use it, don't use it. Yeah, whatever. Just all good. And maybe somebody will come out with a killer app where they'll be like, oh my God, look at this book that I was able to get rid of a gazillion lines of code. Hasn't happened yet.
So, okay, that's use on the client, right? So that's in 18.2. So the server end of things, I think I still don't totally have a great handle on, because you mentioned it as in Next, you could replace like get server side props and such. Can you, and I don't want you to restate exactly what you did, but like, can you paint a picture of what that looks like, or sure, how I might actually use it?
Well, it depends. If you've done PHP, you already have the picture in your head. It looks like PHP, basically. And then many folks have been like, "This is PHP." It's like, yeah, it is. It's just really nice, honestly. I mean, instead of having, your if you want to go get some data from a service on the server side, and you have your component that's going to render it, instead of having two functions where in Next, where it's like export function, get server side props, blah, blah, blah. And then you do your fetches, and then you return your props, and then that gets passed into the next one. You just literally like have the one component. It's not, and you just add async in front of it, and then you just do the fetch right there. And I guess to the extent that typing ever was an issue in TypeScript world, like you had to marshal the types between get server side props and the app and the in the actual component.
JSON serialization, which forever
Kind of a pain in the butt.
shoots me in the foot with undefined and null
Yeah,
values.
right, exactly. But it's elegant and it's pretty, I guess. So you start getting into some weird effects though with it, because like let's say that you have a combination of server side components and also components that want to render on the client and on the server.
Mm-hmm.
Now in Next 13, you have to declare your client side components. So if you want it to run on the client, you have to put at the top of the file, quotes, use client. Has to be the first line of the file.
Okay, so let me ask a clarifying question. With next 12 and below, get server side props, get static props. Those have to be called at the page level. So you can't call them inside of child components that are injected into the page. Like if I have a chart, I still have to have my page fetch the data, pass it to the chart.
Mm-hmm.
Chart component renders it. So with server side props or server side components, is it now that the chart itself can go and fetch that data, and it doesn't care that it's a child component or a deeply nested child? It is fully capable of doing that?
Yeah, fantastic question. Yes, it does. I guess the one little thing that worries me about that is like if you've got the case where a component, you get some data and then that infers that you should then go and render a component, which in turn goes and renders more data, or it fetches and renders more data, then you might have multiple rendering cycles on the server, which is something that Next.js 12 kind of gets around, because like you can only get your data in one spot. Right. And once you got it, then you're good. You got to prop it around or context it around, but whatever. But you do have to make sure that you get everything going. But I can imagine from a dashboard perspective, that ability to basically have any kind of, you just bring in a widget and it just goes and gets its data and you're good to go. And that's pretty cool, actually. Some little hiccups in there. If you create that async function, right, your, chart component, right, and you define it as an async function, it cannot then be a client-side function. So you kind of have to do this weird little dance where it's like, you're probably going to have like a chart container component that's going to go is going to be an async component, a server or a React server component. It's going to go get the data, and then it's going to pass it to a client-side component, which is the chart. Because obviously, I'm guessing the chart's going to have some sort of client-side interactivity, right? Otherwise, what are we doing here?
Right.
Yeah. The gotcha in that is that whatever you pass to that chart in terms of props needs to be serializable, JSON serializable.
Okay.
Or, when you think about it, fairly obvious reasons of like, you're blah, 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 blah. It's like, it's the old hydration thing, right? We're going to go and take a whole bunch of state and then have it in the document and then rehydrate and all that. But so conceivably, and I haven't really seen this so much looking at the flame graphs, the idea is that it's kind of moving towards like islands architecture. So, most of your page would be RSC, server-side components, and then you would have these little islands, which are client-side combination client-side and server-side components. I think that's when you say you want client, it's client and server. And so, and then in that hydration phase on the client, which has been such a thing that everybody's worried about nowadays, you should see less of that. I haven't seen that, but it's hard to tell. I mean, I've used such small apps when it comes to Next.js that it's in this with testing this that I'm not sure I'd see it.
Yeah.
Anyway, fascinating stuff. But you get all these weird rules. Like it's like, oh, you can't have this nested within this or client side. It's just
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. Many people saying, I hate React. God, it's always getting more and more complex.
Needlessly complicated is what it sounds like. It's like you have to know ahead of time. Is it going to be client side? Is it going to be server side? Is it going to be both? If it's both, then you have to do this. And
Yupper. That's why they pay us the big bucks, I guess.
Well, I think like there's still relatively easy ways of implementing these are in a way pretty advanced optimizations in a sense, right? Like this is when you get to this point, it's like I need to find control over which component renders where. So the way I view it is that this at least gives you tools so that if you're in an advanced condition, which you might be, I mean, if you're building production apps, especially like public facing ones, you might need these tools because milliseconds matter. But if you
Sure.
don't, like I'm building an internal app or I'm building whatever, some like one-off thing, then I can get by without knowing the intricacies of all of this because I just come up with some way for my thing to get data. It loads good enough. I get on with my job.
Right. I move forward.
Yeah.
It's certainly with AI, I look at it. There's the high end stuff where I think this plays very well, and then there's this sort of, hey, it's it's our dashboard. If it takes 3 seconds to load, it's an internal dashboard. We just go get a coffee. Whatever. But it's going to take you 3 seconds to get a coffee, but
yeah. Well, but if like Next is driving your like shop e-commerce platform that pays your bills, then like, yeah, you're going to want to be in here knowing exactly how this works, exactly what you can move to the server, exactly what's going to decrease your loading times, because that means money for you at the end of the day.
And weirdly, I guess this all somehow connects to Shopify and Hydrogen because they were doing that whole React server. Oh, sorry.
It's so interesting that you mentioned the e-commerce side of it, part of it, TJ, because of Shopify, who just acquired Remix, which has been a Next. Well, it's not a Next, but it's been a React disruptor, I guess is the best way to put it. It took some of the good ideas from React, but then tacked on more and took some stuff away and kind of went with more of an island architecture and server-side stuff. So, yeah, it's very interesting that now it almost sounds like Next and React are trying to pivot away from client-side everything, which is really where React started its life, into server rendered for blazing faster internet stuff.
Yeah. It's I just because Hydrogen, which is what I guess they're replacing with Remix. Not really sure what the strategy is there, but that had React Server Components way before React Server Components I think were ready for prime time. I mean, I would say this is when React Server Components Next 13 is React Server Components. Like it's like this is the real deal. Like there's racing components, they blah 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 blah. They do all that sort of stuff, and I guess it's a little weird that like the Next.js and React stuff have gotten so tight because it kind of starts to lock out any other potential vendors in that space, and it's almost like
Gatsby's still there, Jack. Gatsby's not giving up. They're just
right. Astro is still out there.
Trying to plug
Gatsby's
along.
still out there. I think didn't Gatsby have a cool new Valhalla release just recently?
Yes. Yeah,
what was that about?
I'm not completely sure because I've just kind of skimmed the releases, but it sounds like Gatsby is trying to make themselves even more dynamic, although they're still a static site generator. So the idea, I think, behind Gatsby and the latest releases that they've done is that when you're hosting on their Gatsby enterprise platform, which is ideally where they want you to be because it gives them the most control and the most revenue generated from it. But the idea is that as new data comes in, even though it is a statically generated site, I think they've figured out a way to kind of update and insert those new bits of data without being disruptive to the user, having to have a loading spinner of some kind. I think they're trying to become more real time or more update driven without it seeming that way to a user. It seems like a static site, but they're still pushing fresh data in somehow. It's kind of magical, but it's an interesting pivot. And I think a lot of sites could benefit from it because, having to run a cron job every night to see, has my site changed? Do I need to rebuild it and push it back out if it's a static one? That just takes that part of it away. So that'd be cool if it works.
Like if you have a comment section on your pages, you could do the overnight thing to regenerate the static stuff for SEO, but then you could also have that kind of live update where you get the most recent comments. Yeah. And I guess on the e-commerce perspective, maybe the price.
Price would be a big one. Keeping track of quantity, as you're selling through things. Yeah. I mean, there's probably a million different things where that would be really useful for an e-com site.
Yeah.
Hey there, this is Charles Max Wood. I'm excited because I wanted to let you know about this thing that I pulled together that I've been dying to have this for years, and I never felt like I could. And then I just realized that there's no reason why I can't. So I'm putting together a book club, and we're going to read development-focused books, career books, technical books, whatever. The first book that we're going to do is going to be Clean Architecture by Uncle Bob Martin. If you're not familiar with Clean Code or some of the other stuff that Bob has done, check that out. I've also talked to him on the Clean Coders podcast, which is on Top End Devs. But we're going to get on. He's going to show up to some of our meetings. And what I'm thinking is we'll probably have like 5 or 6 people part of the conversation along with Bob and I at the same time. And we'll just, so somebody can come on, they can ask their question, and then we'll just rotate people through. So we'll mute one person, unmute another person when it's their turn to come on and be part of the discussion. So we'll do that for like an hour and a half. And then the other part of it that I'm putting together is just kind of a meet and greet gather area on GatherTown. And so after the meetup and the call, what we'll do is we'll all go over to GatherTown, and you can just log in, walk up to a group and have a conversation. And that way we can all kind of get to know each other and make friends and get to know people across the world. One thing that I'm finding is that, the meetups are starting to come back, but a lot of people don't have the opportunity to go to a meetup. And I really want to meet you guys and talk to you. So we're going to put all that together. It'll all be part of that book club. You can go to topenddevs.com/book club to be part of it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you there. The first book club meeting will be in December, the beginning of December. We're starting the first week of December. And you'll also be part of the conversation about which book we do next. I have one in mind, but I want to see where everybody's at. So there you go.
It's a decent business model. And it's the sense that, like, I have a feeling the reason Remix ended up selling or whatever their arrangement was is it's a hard business being a framework on its own without being tied to some sort of a service. And it makes me wonder what Shopify's plans are, because of course they say, well, like every acquisition ever, right? We're going to keep Remix the same. We're going to keep it out. And like, this is the same line you hear all the time. And it'll just be interesting to see if their goal is like internal usage, like they see a way of Remix, like really making the Shopify experience really good, or if their goal is like grow the Remix community, like, or like integrate it into some sort of product. I don't know. It'll just sort of be fascinating to see how exactly that's going to play out.
My hunch is that what they're trying to do is they're trying to get in the small, medium-sized market. Basically, you're selling cookies on Shopify. You're using Shopify, hosting the whole drag and drop. Here's my box of cookies, whatever, $12, and then you get big, right? And now you want to have an interesting experience. Now you want to have more texture to your experience, where potentially, I don't know, 3D rotating cookie boxes or whatever. I'm pushing this metaphor way too far. And hey, the Shopify UI just ain't cutting it. So, and I think that's where Hydrogen was playing, was basically cool. We can still stay on, have our data in Shopify. We'd have our site hosted on Shopify hardware, apparently, using Hydrogen. And there you go. And you can make a better experience, because get a few Fiverr React devs or whatever, and there you go. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know if they market for Fiverr and React devs, but I think
500 or 5,000 or
yeah, right, yeah, 500 an hour. But obviously Hydrogen didn't really take off. I can throw a little shade on that, but whatever. And so now they picked up Remix, and I guess the idea is, and so instead of using Hydrogen, you use Remix, and the big brain trust at Remix would make sure that it's more open source friendly. I think that was one of the things about Hydrogen, was basically, at least from my perspective, they made all the decisions for you. You're going to be on Vite. You're going to be on their version of GraphQL. You're going to be on React Server Components. Do I get a choice in any of these matters? Oh, yeah, and Tailwind. Do I get a choice in these matters? No, you do not. That is it. That is Hydrogen. Enjoy. We made decisions for you. And that doesn't play. Like, open source folks know that's not a thing. You don't get to decide that.
Well, I know this is very anecdotal, but we have a Shopify store at Blues, and I don't know anything about how it runs behind the scenes, but I know every time the person here that has to update it, they always complain when they have to update it.
Womp womp. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And I don't think that it's a big store. I think it's one of the smaller size stores that has less interactive stuff, because for us it is purely just an ordering conduit. We have
Right.
our own website that has developer docs. We have another one that is marketing. So it's just there basically to go buy things.
Do you have an interactive console as well?
Yes,
Then-
we do.
Oh, cool.
You can, well, there's two ways that you can do it. You can actually download an interactive or a CLI that allows you to work with our hardware from your command line, or you can actually do the same thing basically through our developer experience site. We have a web REPL that is basically a copy of the command line. So you can just plug your hardware in to your computer and then connect to it that way, which is pretty awesome. I use it all the time, actually.
Nice.
And I'll attempt to segue back here. It runs on Next.js, which is
it does.
People plug their stuff all the time, and I don't think we've ever plugged Blues, so why not? Let's do it.
Yeah. No, absolutely
Fine.
plug it. But I do want to know more. Like, Jack, do you have like a couple other favorite things about Next 13? Because I need to know whether we need to upgrade that experience or not.
I think I think you can. Yeah, I think you can upgrade just on its own. I mean, it just that's fine. The image, well, no. So the big other thing that happened is the now app directory. So all your pages directory, instead of having pages, you now have app, and it's got a different layout to it. And so one thing, you actually still will have a pages directory, because if you had any API routes, those have to go in /pages/API.
Mm-hmm.
So it still
stays the same. Yeah,
that stays the same. That story remains the same. But now, if you have this app directory, you have it's just organized differently. Like, you can have layouts at multiple levels. So if you have like you can have like high first level routes would all have the layout in the first level of that app directory. And then if you have subdirectories, like, I don't know, like settings, preferences, profile, right? That's what you call it on web, profile. You could have a sub layout within profile that would be contained visually within the layout of the top level profile. So you could add things if you want, like you could add providers, or you may be able add like a breadcrumb visually to it and have it just all kind of nice. I think there's error. There's a couple of different special routes. So yeah, no, it's cool. Like I'm digging on that. And as Paige pointed out, like the idea of having components kind of nested in there and all like grabbing their own data is really cool. There's also an upgrade to image, as I recall. I think there were some fixes to that. A couple of spot things. But it's a big release because of the whole 18.2 and the app directory. It's a lot of pill to swallow conceptually.
So do you know, is there, or you may have already done this, is there a path to migration? Or is it really Next just says, update your dependencies and go to 18 and everything should still work? Are there breaking changes? Are there things we need to be aware of before we try and potentially undertake this?
As far as I know, I was talking to some maniac who was like, yeah, I uploaded on the day and it was great, easy peasy. And you're like, whoa. I think actually, Theo was doing like his usual live stream with that. And I was like, he was having no end of difficulties with some weirdness. Like, they patched fetch. And so it was like returning, it would work fine if the payload was like less than, a couple K, but over that it would die. And you're like, what?
Oh no.
So there were little issues like that, but I think those are apparently gone, seemingly gone. I haven't seen those myself. The problem is it's a version upgrade, and then I think you can incrementally adopt the app directory, and the ordering I think is like if it sees something in page, it'll use the page one first, and then if it doesn't see that route in page, then it'll look in the app directory. So you can just start slowly migrating routes over one by one.
Yeah, and I found their migration guide, and if you trust them, it should be very simple. But it looks like they moved some of their stuff to like a slash legacy path. So like your existing images, you have to get the old image component from slash next slash legacy slash image. So if you wanted to, it sounds like you just upgrade to V13 and then like some of these new components, if you want to keep using the old ones, you have to change your path.
There's also a font thing. Yeah, they've also got new support for fonts, like big time support for fonts.
Nice.
Like made it very easy to like.
Yeah, kind of a pain.
Yeah. Oh, I just did this thing with my current job. They're all about like the very small details, and it was like, oh no, we don't want to use the material icons. We want to use the font awesome icons, and font awesome plus next requires a little bit of hijinks, and it was like. It would sometimes work, sometimes not, and sometimes like when it didn't work, the icons are massive, and it was like,
oh no,
it's crazy.
I'm a huge fan of this because I've in previous lives for web design, I had implemented sites where the designers were obsessed with custom fonts. They're like, we need all 4 of these, and none of these can go right. And this was for the .com, right? The homepage for the entire company. And they wanted 4 custom fonts because they needed different fonts in the header and all of these things. And I just remember going through just absolute nightmares, being like, "There's only it's the site on the page that should load the absolute fastest, and then you're given this requirement, and it's just." So being able to like because it sounds like per their docs, basically you can take externally hosted fonts, point at them, and Next will automatically sort of download them and sort of bake it into your site locally, so that you don't need to do external network requests. So.
Yeah, no, in local fonts, if it got like TTF or WAF2s, I don't even know like which one am I supposed to use. I learn it and then I unlearn it because I'm like, I want to burn that.
I mean, as soon as you get it working, you hope that you will never have to touch it again, and you just
exactly. Oh my god, I can't we have the same thing at my work, and it's a custom font, and I gotta say, like, I think the whole app was running without it. It was like running with basically the standard material stuff for a while, and they didn't notice. And I was like, oh, okay. And I just kind of like, because I was loading the font wrong, and like, I ended up loading it right, and they're like, oh wow, that seems a little better. I'm like, yeah, not a big change. Not a big change. But it's a weird font too. Like some of these off-brand fonts, like the Kerning's good.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, using 4 different fonts on a page, are you a maniac? Like that's way against any kind of UI like guidelines. Yeah.
Well, this was back in the day where one of the custom fonts was for icons, because that's how this was years ago, and that's how you did it.
That's fair. Yeah.
One was for the body text, so all the body text was the same, but they needed different ones. And I believe it might have just been one was like the bold face of a font, and one was the regular face. But they also wanted another one for like the header and stuff like that as well. But it adds up pretty quickly though. I mean, it looked pretty. I wasn't opposed to how the end thing looked, but I mean, I think designers can lose track, especially in those days, of the cost of some of these things they come up with.
Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta like every once in a while look at like the it's always Figma, and it's like, well, what is that component in Figma? And it's like, I don't know. I just drew it. I was like, wait, what? What about? Okay. Yeah.
So, Jack,
this has been really fun. Yes,
based on everything that you've told us and what we've kind of learned today, what would be your advice to anybody who either is interested in React 18 or Next.js 13? In your opinion, would you upgrade now, or would you still hang out for 6 months and see what else shakes out first?
I wouldn't upgrade without like a proof of concept, just to make sure, because it is, if you want to make use of those features, it is a fairly big change, so that you're comfortable with the new app directory layout and how you would take advantage of it if you want to take advantage of the React server components, and just so basically take the critical pieces of upgrade that you're looking for, make a new Next 13 experimental app with the experimental app directory enabled. You get the app directory, it's all done, and then try it out and see. But I would definitely do it. No, I think you're putting yourself behind the eight ball. But I do think we don't know what best practices looks like in this at all yet.
Yeah.
Like, how does this interact with a state manager? Like, what does that mean? Because you can't, in these React Server components, you can't use state, you can't use context, you can't provide, all of that. Anything that's going to need client side stuff is all just, turned off, lint rules, all that. So what does that mean? Does it mean if I'm going to have a page component and it's going to go get some data and I want to provide it to client side stuff, do I need to then have another component that I need to pass it to and then have that and it's just like, whoo. And I don't know, to the extent that we have best practices, we haven't established these best practices at all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're filling me with tons of confidence, Jack.
Oh, great.
Ready to do it tomorrow.
Next is a great, or Versal is a great company. Next has always been a perennially great product. I have full faith and confidence that it will be a thing, and that this is the direction, especially since they're so intertwined with React.
Yeah.
But do we know how to not foot gun ourselves at the moment with it? No.
Not yet.
I actually did make a video specifically about warning, use on Next.js 13, because I'd literally seen Medium articles and YouTube articles showing okay, here's how you do this: use plus, and then a function like fetch data, which would just call fetch, and it's that's the same thing, guy. You just took fetch and just extracted a function that unconditionally called it. There's no, you're still foot gunning yourself, and so.
Maybe a happy middle ground is you can upgrade your versions, because it's usually a good idea to not get your apps too far behind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do the upgrades, but you can do them and just make sure your existing stuff works, right? Just
sure.
Yeah.
Upgrading.
Yeah.
Upgrading doesn't mean you have to jump on the bandwagon and start refactoring everything to use and server components and whatnot. You just bump up your version numbers, switch your path to legacy or whatever, make sure things build. And that way you're on the newest version, you have the new features available. And then when you have a need, when something comes up at work, then at that point you're ready to go.
Yeah. Oh, hey, there's also Turbo Pack, right? Which we haven't talked about.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I don't think that's out. I don't know. But apparently it's if you don't have a wickedly customized Webpack config, or actually I think any configuration changes to Webpack, I don't think it can support anything, because it's it is literally a Rust or Go based Webpack. And they're well, what about reverse compatibility? They're yeah, that's happening, and anyway, it's apparently very fast, but who knows?
I mean, it's already a controversial and hot topic, because I know as soon as it came out and they said that they were 10 times faster than Vite, Evan Yu, who is the creator of Vite, did his own performance testing and debunked that. So
yeah,
take it or leave it. I think it's probably faster, which is great. We all like faster hot reloading, but I don't think it's the one reason that you should upgrade.
There was some I remember looking at the Versal site, and they had they were saying that their minimizer was 300% faster or something like that, and then they somehow they bound that into and that would result in better performance for the customer in terms of bandwidth. And I'm no, because it's one thing to minimize your code, sure, great, and be very fast at it. That's great, but you're not actually creating a more minimized version. There's a dense, there's a you still have to have code, right? You still have so no. Anyway, it was just weird messaging. So yeah, you're right. So right. Anybody says 10 times faster, 100 times. Whoa, there.
Show me how you did that, and then we'll decide.
show me the work, right? An algebra class. Show me that work.
Exactly. Well, that's very cool. And thanks for really kind of disbanding myths, telling us about potential foot guns, because there always will be in new stuff, but also some really cool stuff. So
yeah,
give it a try, listeners, and let us know how it goes. All right. So let's move into the portion of the show where we talk about picks, things that are cool, things that we like, things that we think our listeners also will like.
Have you ever wished that you had a group of people that were just as passionate about writing code as you are? I know I did. I did that for most of my career. I'd go to the meetups. I'd try and create other opportunities. And it was just really hard, right? The meetups, I got some of that, but they were only like once or twice a month. And it was just really hard to find that group of people that I connected with and really wanted to, talk about code a lot, right? I mean, I love writing code. I think it's the best. And so I've decided to create this community and create it a worldwide community that we can all jump in and do it. So we're going to have 2 workshops every week. One of those or 2 of those every month are going to be Q&A calls, right? Where you can get on, you can ask me or me and another expert questions. The rest of them are going to be focused on different aspects of career or programming or things like that, right? So it'll go anywhere from like deployments and containers all the way up to managing your 401k and negotiating your benefits package. We'll cover all of it, okay? And then we're also going to have meetups every month for your particular technology area. So we have shows about JavaScript, React, Angular, Vue, and so on. We're going to have meetups for all of those things. I'm going to revive the freelancer show. We'll have one about that, right? So you can get started freelancing or continue freelancing if that's where you're at. And I'm working on finding authors who can actually do weekly video tutorials on something for 10 minutes that's related to, again, to those technology areas so that you can stay current, keep growing. So if you're interested, go to topenddevs.com/sign up and you can get in right now for $39. When we're done, that price is going to go up to $75. And the $39 price gets you access to 2 calls per week. The full price at $150, which is going to be $75 over the next few weeks, that price is going to get you access to all of the calls and all of the tutorials and everything else that we put out from Top End Devs, along with member pricing for our remote conferences that are coming up next year. So go check it out, topenddevs.com/sign up.
TJ, do you want to kick us off this week?
Sure. So I'm going to start with a pick update. So I picked Magic Puzzle, I think like a week or 2 ago. And the sort of gimmick they have is that they have a surprise you open at the end of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. And my update is that the surprise was definitely worth it and definitely cool. So I'm going to +1 the pick of Magic Puzzle, especially if you're a puzzle person. I'm not going to reveal the surprise, but it's really cool. And we had a lot of fun putting it together. And then my pick for this week is a podcast that I've been listening to called People I Mostly Admire. It's done by the Freakonomics people, which all of their podcasts are really, really good. I think I've picked the main Freakonomics podcast before. So it's done by the same people. It's an interview show. We just interviews just some really interesting people. And I listen to it on and off when I see episodes that look interesting. So that'll be my pick.
Cool. I mean, Magic Puzzle sounds awesome. So it's even better that their surprise at the end was good, because that would just really be sad if it was not very surprising. And that sounds like a good podcast. I'm always looking for more of those to listen to when I'm just doing stuff around the house. So that sounds great.
Cool.
So, Jack, what have you got for us?
I guess I've got an oldie but a goodie. I'm reading now The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And I think my wife was like, oh, I read that way back when. I'm like, oh, okay. Newish to me, but it's fascinating. It's really, it's interesting, from the ethics. It's interesting from the science. It's the history. Is just really, really cool. Great book.
Cool. Good books are always good.
Have you read it?
No, I have not. So
okay.
I'll put that on my list.
Cool.
Yeah, I have not either.
Nice. Okay. So my pick for this week is going to be another TV show. I've been catching up on various series right now. And the one which may have been picked by one of you in the past is the show For All Mankind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I picked it, but yeah, it's a great show. Holy crap. Yeah.
So it's if you're not familiar with it, I think that it is a Sony Pictures, it might be an Apple TV show, but basically
released by Apple TV for sure.
Okay. Yeah. So basically the idea is, what if the US, had been beaten to the moon by Russia? They had been the first ones to land on the moon. And then it just kind of goes into an alternate universe from there. There's colonies on the moon. They're mining for stuff. There's now a race to Mars and who's going to be the first country to get there. And are they going to start doing colonization? So it's really interesting to see what could have happened and where space exploration could have gone if we had been more, I guess, just more into it and more, we got to beat Russia to basically do everything in space that we can. So
Right.
it's really fun to see the way that history could have turned out if things had been different. So if you're looking for one that is very historically rooted, but then kind of twists it and changes things, it's really fun to watch. And it's a good one on outer space stuff. So
and super cool and super timely because we're going back to the moon.
Exactly.
I mean, Artemis 1 launched yesterday and it's on its way to the moon. It was pretty cool. Yeah. We tried to stay up for it, but it was funny. Like we're up at like, I don't know, whatever, 10 or something like that. We're seeing the countdown and we're like, oh, it's going to be, 10 more minutes or whatever. And they're like 10 minutes. And then they finally were like, it's 10 minutes until the launch window opens. And then there'll be a 30-minute hold. We're like, good night. Click. Bye. We're done.
Yeah. Got to get that. I mean, timing is everything, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a late launch for a banner, thing. It's like, guys, launch during the day. You want to really get the people going.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right.
Well, cool.
This has been really fun. Yeah.
It has been. Yeah. I hope everybody has enjoyed kind of getting educated and hearing about some of the new stuff that is available for us. And we will see you on the next episode of React Roundup.
See you next time.
Sounds good. Bye, everybody.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.